So can you talk a little bit about continuities and differences, and also about the decision to kind of move away from documenting an American present to documenting an American past, which in a sense says huge amounts of things about the present too?
Yeah, so methodologically there is definitely continuity. Basically what I've been trying to do since I've started making films is to create the conditions based on which, or thanks to which, or due to which, people could only rely on themselves to kind of verbalize or give body and words to their story, whatever they wanted to say. So make sure that they felt lost in a space, in a place where they could only rely on themselves. In some cases, I called it the performance of the self. In some other cases, I called it experiential cinema. But it all converges into one basic idea, which is I am a facilitator of the situation. I'm making sure that you're safe. This is a space. This is a filmic space. We're going to create something. This is a starting point. Forget about knowing where we'll end, because I don't even know. When I write my film proposals, I put an asterisk, a disclaimer, like as I've been doing for the past 15 years. There's no guarantee that I will deliver a film. I'll deliver an experience, but with this, I'm not committing to delivering a film. I'm committed to delivering footage, and hence the cut of funds coming my way. But so, in a way, what is the difference between this film and other film? Well, I took their own space, out of under their feet, because these people are not inhabiting their space. This is not a documentary. I didn't go to that place. We chose a terra franca. We chose Montana in this case. We went there. We set camp. We spent 2 months there. Every day we were dropped off at a space. That camp that you saw. We were picked up at night. We only shot with available light, so nighttime is the end of the shoot. Nobody knew if they were going to be, in a scene or not. If there was going to be a scene, we were going to go there no matter what. And that was that. Everybody knew that at some point there would be a battle, an ambush, an encounter. Everybody would be called to go through that battle in a certain way. And that was really it. And everybody could desert and say, I'm done with this. I'm out of it. Everybody could be angry, and I would say, well, are you willing to put that anger into the film? Everybody would be happy, same thing. Or so that methodologically, that it's always been the way I approach my film, but they could not be fully themselves. They could not rely on their space, and that takes a lot of safety out of who they are, out of themselves. But that sense of unsafety, of feeling unsafe, like, oh my God, I don't know, uncertainty, fragility, plays really well in a certain genre, a film, a war movie genre. So I don't know if I would do that for every kind of film. But in this case, I was very well aware since the beginning that if I took a bunch of people from all over the country, put them in Montana, together with the Montana local community, among which there's a huge chunk of the National Guard, the Army, which they go on their own trip about war. And if I do that, that will cause a sense of uncertainty, to say the least, that will probably play into the idea of being in one of the most uncertain situations that humanity has ever had to face, not to mention humane, which is conflict.
It's interesting because on some level you're also, by doing that, modeling the very thing you're trying to depict. The idea of sending people from different places around the country to be in a space together and have to make it work, in a sense, there's also kind of an imprint of that in the film. It's kind of mediated very strongly, but in a sense you're also asking them to kind of recreate I mean, essentially what soldiers would have done in that specific situation.
Yeah, there is this idea of kind of creating fractures, creating short circuits, creating mini traumas, you could call, to then rebuild from them. Exactly. So there is that idea. There is an idea that comes from, I'm not discovering anything, even in physical training, they tell you that, right? You have to create micro tear to build your muscle. Exactly. So it's just engraved, really, face your fear, overcome your fear. What does that mean? Well, it means to experience fear. Get into a trauma, stay with the trauma and overcome it. And this happened a lot. I mean, this shoot wasn't easy. Again, nobody went to war really, but people were exposed to situations that are definitely, that made them and made us, including myself, question, how maybe stagnant, life has become. And when I say life, I also say an idea, right? How we think about what, because we are people. Okay, so let's take a step back here. Why are we making this song? A bunch of us thinking about where we're at in the world today, thinking about where we are at with the war movie genre, thinking about why are there a lot of Western films right now. And if you look at history, you see patterns, right? Me Too, Black Lives Matters, and then there's all of a sudden a return of some of the archetypes of the fighter, white fighter. It happened after World War II. So all of that, we're talking, but we are in our heads. We're comfortable. We are, statically talking about it. But how do we make that much more dynamic? How do we challenge our sense of safety? Because in the end, we could talk about this and then I cough and say, oh, well, let's go party, right? Tomorrow we'll talk about, that again, we clean our conscience and that we go on. But how do we make it much more experiential? How do we force people to do through an experience that is, in a way, indelible? Even the mere fact of having to be forced to go through, to master the art of horse riding in no time, doing things that are extremely dangerous, which people did willingly. Some others didn't and quit the project, or some others just walked and were infantry. And things like that. So that we challenged our own personal status quo to the level that we ourselves decided. I didn't force that on anyone. So, yeah, we did create those micro tears, those small tears, and to rebuild from that. And why is the film ending with 2 people? Actually 4, right? Instead of 25. I don't know, that's been decided. The project decided that. It's autogenetic. I mean, this is how it happened. We departed 4 people, and we decided that the night before. There's no... In case that question arises, I'll just answer right now. There's not a single word that has been written on this project. This is a project I've written the least. I wrote 0. I just did a lot of research. Excuse me. So the night before, we decided, there's people here who are willing to keep going, and going higher up, finding a way out seemed very cathartic at the time. So that's how we did, and we withstood a lot of, adversities, in our own little bourgeois world. That was pretty adverse. It was pretty difficult and intense, and in a way transforming.
I find this sort of approach to filmmaking incredibly inspiring. But I guess we're very happy to have your producer with us too, because I think when I hear all those things on a filmmaking level, it sounds very inspiring. On a production level, the idea that you're going to tell a funder, it's going to generate itself along the way, and we don't, the night before we film something, we don't know how it's going to turn out. In a sense, that flies in the face of kind of conventional producing techniques. I mean, we have a really lovely piece in the book where Denise Ping Lee and Paolo talk about, in a sense, this kind of how to go about producing films which, in a sense, don't play by the rules. Can you talk, Paolo, maybe a little bit about the specific challenges of, in a sense, convincing people to give funding for this project, and also the concrete process of producing a project like this, when, in a sense, what makes the project so unique is precisely the fact that it doesn't fit in those categories?
The work is very... Hello, everyone. I think this goes with the fact that, for example, Roberto and I have been working together with Denise in the last, I think, about 10 years. So we produced together 3 films. Roberto also, as you saw in the credits, plays the role of the producer. And this is very important because, in a way, it's a very organic conversation regarding the status of the project, what we can do, what we cannot do. We somehow break all this sort of power relationship that exists between the director and the producer that are not in any way, that do not exist in our case. And this translates also to the outer world because, in a way, I think we are very much convinced of the necessity of this film to exist. And I think each one of us plays by her own rules regarding the way of convincing people. In a way, as Roberto does with his actors, in some ways, it's exactly what we do with all the partners that we, in a way, need to convoke. And money is an issue, yes, is an issue, but in the end, it really goes down to a very, even though it sounds strange with funds, there is a very precise political essence in the gesture of producing a film like this and the way we actually communicate it to the people that leave no way out, in a way. And I think about the arguments, the fact that it's not a scripted film, so you improvise a film like this, set in the 19th century. And for me, for example, it was very clear, just to give you an idea of where do I actually take the conviction. This film really talks, for me, about what it is to tell history. And in a moment where we are more and more just viewers, spectators, as if we do not play a role in history. And this film does a very precise thing, which is to recall us that the telling of history is really a collective gesture. And this idea of the collectiveness creates a very strong political tension. And the fact that the idea of making a film about a 19th century event cannot be scripted, cannot be controlled, as someone thinks, no mistakes, no unexpected, which is exactly the opposite. And I think what the film does, in fact, is this idea of really walking into the darkness. And the fact of telling history is really to walk in a space that we do not know because we were not there at the time. And so this idea of remembering, it's not really reconstructing, but in a way it's a work of making resurface something that is somewhere inscripted in us. And I think that the film does it in a very, the spontaneity of the actors, that it's so, in a way, surprising in the fact that remembers us that, yes, history can be only told walking into the darkness with a candlelight, being very, with tenacity and awe, and to be very open to the unexpected. And this idea translates into the work that I do production-wise whenever I talk to fans, broadcaster, distributor, sales agent. And it's the political dimension of my work. It's not only making business, because it would be very boring. So we have a greater responsibility, I think, as filmmakers, and this is the way I do translate it. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Any questions from the audience? We have some mics, because it's a big space, so you won't have to shout. So feel free to give us your inputs. Give us your comments. Again, we're also in a collective experience here, and it's nice to kind of enjoy the full benefits of that. No, I mean, there's somebody. Okay, awesome. I mean, the thing is, we can't see so much from here. So, like, if you wave your hands crazily, then we'll know. That's amazing. That's exactly what... Okay, perfect. So we'll go to you, and then after that to you. Go for it. Thank you.
I wanted to ask, your DOP did also do the score, which is a kind of unusual combination. So how did that came to pass, and can you talk about that a little bit, perhaps?
Yeah. So after shooting the film, we took 6 months to only work on sound, and I wanted to work on sound with the people who were involved in the shoot, so that we could rely only on their kind of the emotional response to an experience, not to a film. In other words, I didn't want any sound, including music, but not only, to be just subservient to the image. I wanted sound, the soundscape, and the music and the score to have kind of their own life, their own narrative. If I shut down the images, I think you will hear a progression, kind of almost an arc of sound. There are several elements, organic and inorganic. Same with score. So Carlos, who's also a musician, and I want to work with Carlos on that, just scoring emotions. And after 6 months, that we had worked a lot on sound post. Then we started editing image, taking sound into consideration. So that was actually an inversion of the tradition of the conventional process, which I think production-wise it might not make sense, but creatively it does, because it was incredibly inspiring to get into picture editing, knowing that we could already, some music and sound already evoked a lot and already told some of the story, and based on that we started editing picture. So yeah, there's nothing, and that's how we placed the music. So Carlos scored based on his own experience. He basically scoring the experience, which is part of this experiential, kind of 360-degree experiential approach to the film.
Thank you very much. I think we had another question here, and then we'll go to you further forward. Go for it. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the beautiful film. I want to ask if you can comment on that observation. We got to know a little bit the soldiers when they were talking about their feelings, but there was not much background story to them, and there was not really, for my opinion, there was not really one person which was the focus on. And on the other hand, you shot many pictures you shot. There was a portrait shot. You had the focus on one person, and all the other things were fussy, and the background was fussy. So perhaps you can comment on that.
Sure. Yes. So eliminating the backstory, the background story of each individual, or focusing on just one element. It's a constant search for some common denominator, or some core, you could call it, or some nucleus molecule, which has its own value, has a value in and of itself, political value, human, despite all the specificities. So culturally, we tend to label everything, including people, or rank people in terms of, morally, like good, bad, right, wrong, as soon as we gather information, process information about them. If one of the soldiers would say, oh, by the way, I murdered 30 people in my life, it would have been very, and I did that in my previous film as well. It wouldn't be really hard to make a case for the person to be worthy of, in a way, salvation, of just worthy of peace, basically. So by framing, so using lenses, by the way, vintage lenses that have that focus aberration, which forced me to focus only on one single subject in the middle. And by not digging into the backstory of each character, there's only a few things to rely on. Just people who are alive, people are basically equal. The less specificity we include, the more equal people look like, the more equanimity there is. It's just, for me, this audience. And I think it is not just a democratic process of approaching things. It's just, I think it's at the core of a humanistic approach to things, like a non-judgmental approach. So for me to deliver this idea, the idea carries a message. I'm delivering an idea. The idea is that there are a bunch of people at war. And in this specific case, they're at war with people who inhabit the same spaces, speak the same language, gather from the same culture, come from the same military academy. And for reason they still, for unclear reason, as it is in the case of a lot of wars, they need to kill each other to survive. And that is the most dehumanizing thing that the humanity has ever had to experience since the beginning of times. So in order to do that, I needed to steer clear from anything that could shift the balance, or if you draw a line, what the line is, the balance, humanity, shift it, either way. Make us feel, create a hierarchy, a difference among them. And I think politically, as soon as you start doing that, we fall into a lot of problems, because differentiation creates, especially in a context of war, create immediately falling into the good and evil dichotomy. So that's the reason.
Thank you very much. We have another question here at the front.
Thank you very much for this meditative study. I was impressed by introductory scene with the wolves. I was wondering how it was filmed, and I felt really significant this scene confirming the idea that you just announced right now, and like the crossing of the line of humanity. Can you comment on that, please?
So that scene is the last thing I shot in the film. You can see that the snow is melting. The film is shot and edited chronologically, except for the scene, right? We start in the fall, we get into the winter. And that scene that opens the film is where the snow is melting. It's actually the spring. That's shot in May 2022. And as I was shooting, I'll tell you, I'll go back to how I shot it. As I was shooting, I realized that I was seeing something very organic, all right? Killing and feeding and the cycle of nature. And it didn't, after reflecting upon war and what it meant, to just the state of being a war for us, human beings, as I said, 40 people were from the National Guard, people killed. I saw their friends killed. So the conversation was really intense, very cathartic. That felt like nature, just nature doing running its course. But I thought, if I opened the film with that, without contextualizing it, that is an image of brutality. The brutality of nature, instead of nature running its course and perhaps, whereas the brutality somewhere, resides somewhere else. So I find it very interesting, the fact that image placed in the beginning could signify brutality, and whereas it is actually much more organic and natural than the rest of the film, or man killing man, in general. How do I shoot that? Well, I had this idea of an encounter, man and nature in the wild for a long, long, long time. And I finally met someone who lived between Montana and Canada, so close to Canada in the mountains. And where in that part where he lived, there were he told me, between 20 to 30 wolves roaming around very, very freely and very frequently, just because of the of food, of livestock that was in the area. When that man, again, it took a long time, but when that man found a dead deer in the street, then I did we put the deer somewhere with a very reduced crew, me sitting down, basically microphones on the trees, we waited. And 3-4 wolves showed up, and then 4 wolves showed up. And I sat down, and a dance between me and the wolves started, because the wolves kept on dragging the deer away from me, and I would just screw over and try to get closer. And there was this man with a wooden stick next to me, telling me not to worry. And then a wolf immediately, took my lavalier and the tree away, because it probably smelled like man. But the only thing is that at some point, wolves were wreaking havoc. This man left. I was sitting there. I was this tall, right? And then all of a sudden, I see, I'm looking at the screen. I'm looking at the viewfinder. And then all of a sudden, I hear the smell. Yeah, there was a wolf here. That wolf went somewhere, very sneaky, and then it was here. And it stank. I smelled the stench of a wild animal, wild beast, and he indulged in smelling me. And I felt, nothing. I'm not going to tell you a spiritual story. I felt at peace. Nothing of that. I felt really scared. Very scared. Oh my God, where's calling my mom, all of that. But apart from that, I felt like, if I don't represent danger. There's food there, but this is not about killing enemies. This is about getting, he's well fed, and there's no reason to do anything to me. The only thing I thought that it was the furry thing around my microphone, and I thought if he pulls the camera, he can have it for sure. that's for sure number one. I felt perhaps and I was right. The wolf lost interest in me. I wasn't food, and that was it. And I lived in Texas for 14 years. I moved to New York 3 years ago, and it feels very different. I moved because of many reasons, Texas policies, And I would never trust an armed man, even an armed friend. But now I could say I could trust, a wolf with a full belly, because, and that's that. And that's how we shot that.
So you go to the shoot without a script, you go with an idea, and to what extent does the idea that you have, and you find the film as you make it, and to what extent does the original idea and what you come out with at the end, to what extent do those two things overlap? Is that right? Yeah,
so I don't go in with a screenplay. I rely on the oral tradition of storytelling. And that's something that I'm not joking. I'm not trying to be pedantic or anything. Just that's how it's part of our fundraising. Like your readability of a story is not it's not one of the most important factors based on which you find a film. Readability, right? Because an artist is supposed to surprise and break boundaries and bypass the status quo and all that. So I go there with just a basic idea. For me, like I said in the beginning, I need to kickstart an experience. I need to make sure that there will be stories. I will film stories, and I know that I can put together a film. I just don't know which one. So I went in with this idea. Obviously, the backstory, the historical context, the territory, all of that I knew. But the story is as follows. A contingent is deployed in Montana. Why Montana? 1862. The gold rush is starting. This is historical facts. The government had an interest in putting their hands onto the gold resources. 13 years later, in exchange for that, they violated the American Indian treaties. Okay? So let's close this parenthesis. We are there. At some point, there will be a clash with enemy forces. What the enemy forces? It does not matter. Enemy forces. Somebody shooting you as an enemy. It could be outlaws or gold diggers or Confederates, which is unlikely in Montana. It does not matter. Then we will assess the situation, or we see where to go from there. I need to see the response to an attack to see where we go from there. Maybe that's the end of the film. Maybe that's not. And that was that. That's it. That's how the project started. The way I see it, actually, is the film after the ambush, which I shot in about 21 days. Except for the beginning, I shot it individually. Everybody follows the same path, has to go through a ditch, and there are snipers, there are people shooting blanks. It's very scary, actually. Although you know a bullet is not going at you, but you don't know where they are. And then it gets dark because there's no time to go through, to do the whole path, with the light, because it's dark is coming. Sun sets very quickly in the mountains. Every single day, people did that, and that's how I put together the scene. And for me, after seeing all of that day after day and after day after day, the way I see it is I think I had to deal with a story of ghosts after the ambush. For me, not that I'm not giving a reading of the film, but for me, I felt the story became a ghost story. Somebody survives, somebody dies, but something always dies. And that is also, years of working with war veterans, which is true. Trauma is death, right? Trauma is metastasizes. So for me, after that, and I could see in the bodies, in the faces, some people went through malnutrition, some other people went through, and I could see the people who stayed, they were just, they were ghosts. And for me, I could see this film almost as, in a way, there are no survivors after the battle. But how did I come up with this idea, which I'm not even sharing? I'm sharing it now because I love Vienna, I love the audience, but I'm not even talking about this in interviews ever, because I experienced it. Because that's that part of the story. I wrote it as I was observing it. I thought maybe this is the story. Hence the title as well, Damned, Condemned. It depends whether you're more secular or non-secular about you going, the way where you go about the story. But Damned and Condemned, it's what interested me. But yes, that's how I work. And I knew I could deliver a film. But I didn't know which one.
Thank you. Any more questions, please? Feel free to raise your hands. Yeah, let's go over to the side. We'll get you a mic 1 second. Go for it, thank you.
This goes in line with what you said right now. Thanks for the beautiful film. I like the faces a lot and the expression of the faces, and it reminded me of like paintings from the Middle Ages or from the Renaissance, where you see faces somewhere in some landscape where there's the fate hitting them, and that made the story very strong. So I was curious if this is an effect you intended, and the beards, the eyes that are trying to kind of observe the landscapes. This was made the message special. I was just curious of any resonance from your side to this.
Yeah, so I knew from the get-go by the choice of the lenses, of those vintage lenses. It's the first time I used in a wide angle, and I knew that I would frame people in the middle, and I knew that I would frame a lot in close-ups without camera movements. We do perform panning and tilting. I knew, and I told my co-camera operator that every time he did that, there would be an editing cut. I would not include any tilting. This would have to be approached pictorially. It's true. So there is a reference to pictorial arts, like a sequence of frames, which is actually in the nature. It's at the true core of filmmaking. But that was the idea, to make this film be, in constant connection, a symbiotic connection with history, with other art forms, with a past, right? So the stillness, the iconization of unknown people, nameless people, right? Which we inherited from pictorial arts. We marvel, about nameless people for just their inherent beauty. So yeah, that is very, very intentional. As far as the look goes, I didn't tell anybody to wear or not wear a beard, or to talk in a certain way, not talk in a certain way, to look somewhere or to close or open their eyes. That comes from them. But what I do gift them or curse them with is the length of a take. For those who have met me in the past year, they already know that I very reluctantly cut a take, so I film forever. It's very important for me to create that tension, to go through the tedium. Tedium is a very powerful force. It's something I love in my life. Every time I can be tedious and bored and just do nothing, I feel like, wow, I'm actually slowing life down, so I just love it. Sitting down and just staring at the void is my favorite activity in life because I feel like I'm preserving energy, a little bit of vital energy. So that is also something that I feel, things going very slowly, it's something that I relate with. But apart from that, when I turn on a camera and I don't say anything, and the camera just never cuts, and it just, in a way, people have a natural tendency to use that bottled up energy, that tedium, to do something. It is a powerful motor, powerful engine for something, tedium. People react to it. So I film forever, and I gather all those silences, and then I gather all what is non-silent. And thanks to the silences, there's something non-silent. So that's how I film. I film long takes, an hour or more. It's extenuating, but it's also, extremely rewarding in the end. And so this film can be bored for somebody, probably for the people who left, at least. And maybe some of the people who graciously stayed and say, we don't want to humiliate this dude. But, a lot of people might experience that boredom and the slowness of the film, which I understand. But there's also a personal attachment to that. There's a personal attachment to the idea. First of all, I make films I want to watch. So one of my favorite films bores the hell out of me. Like, every time I say, oh, man, I got to go watch my favorite film, like Stalker. Tarkovsky, oh my God, I'm gonna be bored like to death because it bores me, and that's like, how was it? I got so bored, man, and I felt it. I felt the film because I was bored. I mean, I don't reject boredom even in my life. Stillness, boredom, nothingness, nothing to do, being an amoeba, larva. It's like it's something that I'm preserving. It's almost like, but one day I'll be full of energy, right? Because I'm conservative. So there is something that, first of all, I like it. So apologies for those who find it bored, but I do like it. It's the way I feel. It's that rhythm that I like. I'm very reluctant. I'm very averse to high-paced stimuli. I just can't deal with it. So number one. Number two, it's because I do believe that there's something very safe in nothingness, in stillness. And this is very pertinent in war. This is actually facts. Nothingness is what you pray for every single day. So to make a film that is so jittery, high-paced in war, it's just a spectacle. And it's just extremely, I don't like to say wrong because I don't like to label things, but it's extremely dangerous politically to create a spectacle out of war. And that's that.
Thank you very much. I think we have... there were two ladies. Yeah, I think we have time for both those questions, and then we'll maybe call it a night. It's in the week. So yeah, go for it.
Hi, thank you for the film. I wanted to ask, because I've seen documentaries of you, and I wanted to ask why you chose to make a war feature film now.
Yeah. So, number one, the way we edited the film was heavily informed by the war in Russia-Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, because we started editing while the war started, and I think the ambush gained traction in a way in terms of length and depth of it because of what was going on around us, even though we were editing in New York. I've been wanting to, I moved to the U.S. in 2000. I had never met, I never met a country in peace. But if you track history back, there's never really, there have only been arguably some moments of peace in human history. So war is such a constant in life. And yet nowadays, as societies have evolved and changed into something else, there's legislations in place and super partes organization and institutions in place, and yet we don't avoid it. In the case of America, and that's why I made a film about that refers to certain times in America. America's number one is always built by distraction. Number two, war economy, is worth $3.5 or so trillion. And so in America, the being a war and the identification of an enemy is done for reasons that transcends completely geopolitical, fairness. Okay, so it is a very profitable industry sector, and then there's another aspect that I actually that really stirred me up living in the South for 14 years, is that in the South especially, but this is something that plagues the United States, there is a complete distrust for the institutions, except for politics of war from the same institution. That is sacred. It's sacred. The government is always right. Always tells the truth. Transparency. They're always watching Americans back. They're doing what's best for America. It's the only instance where there's blind faith towards the government. All those things. So it's not now. All those things have been brewing within me and my peers and collaborators for a long, long time. And I would argue that The Other Side is a film about war. The Other Side, I followed in 2014 the militia. Some of them were in the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Some of the same people saying we need to take over the government. Our freedoms are just dissipating. So I would argue that's a film about war as well. So it's war is engraved. It's a huge part of my American chapter, the American chapter of my life, and it was about time that I made a film that is a reflection about war. I could tell if you were like having a beer, I could speak for another hour, tell you why the U.S. Civil War, but I think I've already bored you enough with the film, let alone if I spoke about the Civil War. But I really love talking about these things forever, for years. Been talking about this for like 5 years now.
Okay, go for it. Nick. Final question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it was a great work. I think my impression was it was the idea of the human being, or more saying, the struggle of the human survival and the force of human survival. It was a great work. Maybe two questions also for the producer. This story, this surrounding in the States, the Civil War situation, as you said, it was your choice, but it could be also, as you also said, it was not necessarily very important. What's the background? What's the feeling for this metaphysical approach? So is it just a layer? Could it be everywhere, for instance, in the ocean, remoted, or in the desert, or maybe in a social hard industrial area? This is maybe the first question. And your shooting conditions must be also very hard. This is maybe the question: how big was the effort, and how much you destroyed the remote nature where you was in? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So all of that, changing the interchangeability of places and the climatic condition, they all kind of go together, right? Those are all the forces that point at an experience. I shot films in the extreme heat of the summer, and that definitely affects the behavior of people. And not only behavior, I mean also the time at which they react to stimuli, their mood. Their stamina. So this is my first film in the extreme cold, and the extreme cold caused perhaps I think it did slow things down. The extreme cold affected heavily the pace of the film. Shooting this film somewhere else would have been a different thing. So in that sense, there is total interchangeability, but it would be a different film. Would I be open to it? Of course I'd be open to it. In Montana, it made sense. I had the resources, I had access to spaces and people, and I went for it. But, 10 days before shooting this film, I was thinking of upstate New York, and I was thinking of Colorado. I could have shot it in California and think about, maybe some militia corps, because they weren't fighting the Civil War back there, except for a scuffle that has been registered in history, documented in history. So, yeah. I mean, I like this aspect. We are working on another fiction film, and I know that questions will come. They're already coming about locations, and my answer is always, I'm open to anything. Anything is, brings an opportunity for a different story, and it's very inspirational to me. So, yeah, maybe that's a question for the producer. That makes it very complicated to produce. But it depends on how you see it, complicated or exciting, because I could shoot anywhere. The same story, I could shoot anywhere. And I'll tell you more. When I watch a film, in general, okay, not all films, sometimes I like to think of the film if it was shot somewhere else, if the story was still hold. This American film, if I shot this in, Montenegro or in, in southern Chile, would it still hold some value, or is it rely on the specificities, the idiosyncrasies? Is it actually kind of exploiting in a way a place and a time, or it would still work as an idea? And sometimes I giggle, like, that film in Japan doesn't work at all. Like, I'll see that film. If you shoot in Japan, it'd be so cheesy. Like, I see you rely on that place. That's just me and doing my own little, like crazy little thing. But for me, that's important. I like the fact that a film could actually move in time and place and take it on a different shape. But if there's something fundamentally valuable, whatever the value is, okay, valuable to a story, to a film, I think there is a lot of interchangeability. You can change the factors, it still works. And that's why I think I'm easy to produce, although I might be very difficult to produce. I do still think I'm easy, because I do think it does no matter where you place me. There's always a story with the S. And then, we create one with a capital S, which will be the film. But, stories, if they have an inherent value, they can be, you can change a lot of factors and still come up with a story with a capital S. Jesus. This is what a bunch of at 11 p.m. saying those things. I apologize, though.
Paolo, do you want to add anything about the production side of things? I mean,
maybe there is another.
Yeah.
Anyway, I agree with Roberto that in the end, it's not very complicated to produce Roberto. Exactly for this reason, we're very capable of adjusting to situations, and we can take out pieces, add in pieces. This idea of improvising the film can produce anxiety, but can also produce, as Roberto said, a sort of a kind of an excitement that it's not per se, but it really has to do with the fact that we are engaged in telling a story that it's about reality. And I say reality not to say the cinema of the real, all those labels, but something that it's never linear, and it's always open. And it's actually built on this idea that it's in progress, it's waiting for, that also gives us an incredible hope. Because no matter how serious these films are, the way they are built, they really open up to, the end of this film even though it can be intended as a ghost story, it's like a breath. It really gives you the possibility that we are in a way in the, no, it's not even power, it's really a force that we actually own about the possibility of writing. And again, what actually we do in the film of Roberto is exactly so. So why should it be in, again, what I said before, in the position, in the condition of having the power of controlling even my anxiety or my anxiety. It's not about controlling. It's exactly by let it go and see what actually can come out of it. So then there are all practical things, but we always solve those things. Also because we have a director like Roberto that we work with. So there is this idea of, anyway, constructing, no matter what film that will be coming out at the end, we are constantly in this very proactive gesture, despite the tedium, despite all the waiting, that it's really about something that we are building something that it's for us and for the audience to share, and needs to have that energy.
Thank you very much. I think that's a great way to end things. Just if you found this late night, 11 o'clock conversation interesting, we published, as Eva said at the beginning, we published a book, Text to a 7, about Roberto's work, where both of the men on the stage with me have very interesting insights into their respective processes. There's many more people giving insight into their collaborations with Roberto, also their views on his work. So, yeah, if this has kind of piqued your interest, there's a lot further and deeper you can go. So indulge those feelings if you so choose. And yeah, a big round of applause for Roberto and Paolo. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.